What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Pony Lawson, and today we're going to be talking about tattoos. Big surprise. But more specifically, apprentice tattoos, and hopefully give them a tip or two to help them improve their work. All right, let's check out what we got. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. If you couldn't already tell, we're in a new space. Now, we're just getting settled in, so I'm sure some things are gonna move around a bit, but we are super excited to be here, and maybe we'll get to give you a tour later. So don't forget to subscribe because you're not gonna wanna miss it. Now, let's check out this first tattoo. All right, this one is sent in from Joe Buxton. And Joe, you mentioned you've been tattooing for about 5 months, and you sent over this little heart vial. And the first thing I'm gonna say about this tattoo is I really think it's lacking line weights, especially when it comes to that outside perimeter. I just really wish there were a thicker outline around the vial to separate itself from the banner and the leaves. And the lines themselves, especially when it comes to the banner, are very inconsistent. There's not really one smooth line throughout that entire thing. And when we look close, you can definitely tell where you started and stopped, or at least hesitated a little. You want to plant your hand down, make sure it's sturdy, and then hover over that stencil line a few times before committing. These long lines can be tricky, but they are what's going to be most noticeable. If that's something you're struggling with, maybe practice on fake skin first just to make sure that you're able to pull those nice long lines. While we're on the banner, those letters or words inside of the banner are pretty awful, if I'm being honest. It's really hard to tell what they say. That name is very long, and that's probably something you should have broken up into 2 banners, or at least just use their first and last name. Because over time those lines are gonna spread, and it's gonna become a lot more difficult to read than it already is. Script probably wasn't the right choice here, just because there are so many lines and a lot of room for error, especially this early in your career, because that's a difficult one to pull off even if you're a seasoned veteran. The vial itself doesn't really have that 3-dimensional feel, and the liquid is just one tone. I would have liked to seen some variation. Maybe add a couple bubbles or a splash or two, make it feel like actual liquid. Speaking of the liquid, the line at the top has the same curve as the bottom of that banner, making it really confusing. Now on to those leaves, if that's what they are. I really think you need to practice leaves on paper first, or at least fake skin, because these are probably the worst parts of the tattoo. They all look wilted, there's not really any life in them, and they're all just poorly shaded in. Let's take this leaf up at the top right, for example. All these little veins are just jetting out of the center, almost perpendicular. And I'm really not satisfied with the shape of this leaf, so let's change that up a bit. And when we do this center line, we're gonna take these other outer veins and just come off that center line and work our way up top. By keeping these things moving in a similar direction, you're really gonna give it some nice shape. Even if you're not going for realism, this technique can be used in any style, and it's just gonna be a lot more pleasing in the end. So Joe, I know you're early into your career, but there is a lot to focus on, and even the smaller details in your design, like the leaves, are just as important as the rest of the tattoo. So make sure you're putting in the work even in those smaller areas. And I really think you need to focus on pulling nice, clean, straight lines. But thank you so much, Joe, for sending that over. All right, the next tattoo sent over is from Seth Akin. And Seth, you sent over this little bank robber shrimp, and I gotta say, I love the design. For being your third tattoo, I'm pretty impressed, and you didn't overdo it on the details. I also like how you added just a little bit of black to give those reds in the body some pop. I do like how you left some room to breathe when it comes to that ski mask, and you didn't just color the entire thing black. I also like how you didn't cram too much detail into that money bag, and although that little dollar sign's not perfect, it is adorable. You do have a couple little blowouts throughout this tattoo, but again, being your third tattoo, that's to be expected. But for the most part, you do have some clean lines in this tattoo, and the color is fairly well saturated. So great job, Seth, on picking a design that is well within your skill level and not overcomplicating things. And I do appreciate you so much for sending that over. All right, the next one sent over are from Levi Gun. And Levi, you sent over 2 tattoos, and this first one being a meat hammer. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a white glare or, oh. It looks like he beat the hell out of that weenie. Get out of my room, Dad. It's a glare, it's a glare. All right, let's get to the quality of this thing. My eyes are immediately drawn up to those letters, and I gotta say, those letters are all over the place. Much like the first one, it seems like letters are a bit of a challenge for you guys, because there is not one clean letter in the bunch. I'm not sure if you drew that on or if it were stenciled, but it's just messy. Looks like you did it with a hammer and a wiener. I mean, I don't know what to say about those, they're just rough. But even when it comes to the lines around the sun, there's not really one straight line. I mean, these are pretty short lines. There's not really any reason for these to not be straight. As we said before, you don't want to just throw these things in here. You gotta get yourself set up to pull a straight line.
Spread, wrist, pivot.
It's his finishing move.
I mean, the lines around the laurel really aren't too bad. They seem to be the best outlines in the entire tattoo. But where it counts is where you're really slacked, especially because our eyes are drawn to that red. And going back to that meat hammer, it doesn't really feel like it belongs in that tattoo at all. I think you could have stacked meat on top of hammer and moved it closer to the tattoo, or even used a banner to contain those words. You've also got a couple of stragglers here and there, obviously up in the letters, around those M's, and also at the top of the ween. Not really any way to fix that one around the tip, but maybe keep that in mind for next time. There's also a little design element that I'm not the biggest fan of, how the bottom of that hammer touches the leaf. That would have been an easy fix had you just rounded the end of that hammer just a bit sooner. And the same thing could be said for the bottom of the wiener. It's just coming a bit too close to those leaves. But you did send in another tattoo. It's these two little cherries on what appears to be an arm. Aside from the outlines looking a little squiggly, overall this one does look a bit cleaner. However, there are a couple issues that I want to bring up. The first one being, I'm very curious as to why the stem on the right side is a lot more straight and solid than the stem on the left. I mean, they should have been very similar motions, unless you did the first one on the left and you learned a lot by the time you got to the one on the right. But then again, I guess you're learning, so hey. I'm just sure the one on the right is going to heal a lot better than the one on the left. I wish the shading in the cherries were a lot more solid and less patchy. You got to work on those blends a little bit. Try to make a seamless transition from that black to the red. This will just make the cherries a lot more smooth and three-dimensional overall. And I'm not really sure why, but the leaf kind of bothers me a bit. I don't know if it's the colors you chose or the way you shaded it, but something's not right. That little piece just looks like an additional leaf. I don't know. The blue in the background is a bit patchy. That should have been the easiest, cleanest thing in this entire tattoo. That just goes to show me that you don't quite understand how to saturate properly. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff, but these are the fundamentals of tattooing. Straight lines and solid color. But thank you so much, Levi, for sending those over. Real quick, I want to take a break and give a shout out to the sponsor of this channel, Mad Rabbit. Mad Rabbit is a tattoo aftercare company that I've been using for quite some time, and I think you ought to give it a try as well. They've got all types of products to help you out with your tattoo. Whether that's during or after, they've got you covered. So head on over to madrabbit.com, fill up your cart, and make sure to use code PONY20 to save 20% off of your entire order. All right, let's get back to it. All right, and the next one sent over is from Nathan Cazztro, and Nathan, you sent over this cute little Pokemon Bulbasaur tattoo. See, I know my Pokemon. I bet I could name 10 Pokemon. Pikachu, Bulbasaur, Mew, Charizard, Venusaur, Ivysaur, Squirtle. Can't forget Squirtle. I don't know, and then 3 others. I can't name 10 Pokemon, what the hell? All right, anyway, pretty solid tattoo. Couple things I want to talk about. The first being, I wish there were a lot more variation in color with this tattoo. Like when it comes to the pumpkin. I wish there were some more dark browns and some dark oranges in there to really set off those highlight colors. And the same thing could be said about Bulbasaur as well. If you would have brought those darker teals into the face a bit more, I think it would have given it some more depth. But right now where it sits, it just comes off a bit flat. You did let a couple lines get away from you, especially when we look up to that left ear. I do see some change in thickness. Looks like you backed over that thing a couple times, like a dead puppy in the driveway.
Damn.
Am I tripping? Is this not Bulbasaur? I mean, I did check my Pokédex, and I noticed that Bulbasaur has some shapes on the head that you seem to have left out, if this is in fact Bulbasaur. You've got those shapes on the arms and legs, so I'm just very curious why you didn't put them on the forehead. And if this isn't Bulbasaur, just forget everything I ever said. Except about your techniques, of course. I mean, I do gotta give you props on your saturation, as it does seem like you know how to pack color, especially when it comes to those light blues and oranges in the pumpkin. And I do think the tongue itself could have used a bit more deep tones. It's just coming off a bit light. And one last thing that I think this thing could have really used is a nice thick black outline around this entire tattoo. It would have really just set off those lighter colors and given it a nice contrast. But overall, pretty decent tattoo for an apprentice. I don't really have too many complaints. But thank you so much, Nathan, for sending that over. All right, up next we've got one sent in from Felicia out of Sweden. And Felicia, you sent in a couple tattoos, the first one being this nice little heart with a face inside. Now this one's not really overly complicated, but it is done fairly well. I actually like how the heart isn't fully complete. It just gives it a nice soft appearance. I mean, the eyes are straight, the nostrils are even. Not too bad for an apprentice. I do think the nose itself does seem to have a bit of a curve to it. Maybe you went a bit too far with that inside shading, or maybe her nose did have that curve to it. I don't know. But overall, very solid design and well executed. However, you did send over another tattoo that I want to talk about that has a lot of great elements. This right here I think is a perfect design for a learning apprentice. This has all the right ingredients to build a great foundation. You've got some really great lines throughout this entire thing, and you've got some very nice smooth shading. And the contrast from the shading in the hair to the rose is beautiful. You've got a lot more blacks in the hair, and you left the rose toes a bit more open so it just has a nice juxtaposition. This is exactly what an apprentice should be striving for, and the type of designs that they should be practicing. You did mention in your email that you've been apprenticing for 3 years, which I think is a bit on the longer side, but maybe they have a different approach in Sweden. I'm not exactly sure why you're not a full-time artist yet, because these tattoos are pretty damn solid. Either way, you can clearly tell that you took your time on this piece and you put all the shades right where they belong. Again, I think this is a beautiful example of solid apprentice work. So thank you so much, Felicia, for sending these over. Alright, that's going to wrap it up for the critiques this week, but I do want to give props to the apprentice who I think did the best job. And this week was a little tough, guys, but I think Felicia outshined them all, especially when it comes to this beautiful flower face design. I do like the other heart design that she sent in as well. However, when it comes to this design, you can really tell that she took her time. This is why traditional tattoos are so important, because these types of tattoos are what's going to test your skill and ability. Had she not pulled off that huge circular design so well, you'd be able to notice in a heartbeat. And I know some of you guys might think it's unfair because she's been an apprentice for 3 years. However, an apprentice is an apprentice. And hopefully this pushes you guys, whether you're an apprentice or not, to be practicing these skills. But Felicia, once again, great job. Tell your bosses to start paying you. And congratulations on being my favorite this week. Alright, now that's going to lead us into one of my favorite parts of the series, and that's shining a spotlight on somebody who I think you should all be following. And that artist this week is Brill out of Orlando, Florida. Brian's work shows you that you don't have to be overly complicated to make a solid tattoo. He knows right where to put his line weights, his saturation is extremely solid, and he has this dynamic contrast that I love so much. Another thing I love about his work is his use of light and shadow, making his work very dramatic. Not only is his work superb, but his designs are super fun. If you're into anime or pop culture style tattoos, this is definitely somebody you want to be looking at. And apprentices, don't steal, but learn from what these guys are doing. He seems to pack so many different techniques into his tattoos that I really think he's worth checking out. So go give him a follow, like all of his stuff, and let him know I sent you. Alright, now that's going to be it for the episode this week. We're losing light, we got trains, we got to get out of here. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next week.